Chris Jericho and Impact Wrestling could potentially AEW's Chris Jericho, the first ever AEW World Champion, the former WWE Undisputed Champion, the first ever WWE Undisputed Champion, could Chris Jericho potentially make an appearance in Impact Wrestling in the future? Well, according to Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Don Callis, it could be a possibility in the future. Now, last week, Impact Wrestling held their latest edition of the Press Pass. Now, if you haven't seen it before, they do it on social media. They do it usually in the run-up to big events, so they did a load in the run-up to Bound for Glory. They're going to do now a load in the build-up to Hard to Kill. But the latest edition of Press Pass for the media had on its Executive Vice President of Impact Wrestling, Don Callis. Now, he actually took the call from Jacksonville, Florida, where he was going to appear on AEW Dynamite with Kenny Omega last week. Now, during the call, Don Callis fielded a variety of questions from all of the media around the world of Impact, AEW, Kenny Omega, New Japan, but perhaps most interestingly, the actual best question, I think, on that call was the response to a question about his longtime friend, Chris Jericho. Now, Chris Jericho was brought up by a caller on this Press Pass call, and they asked Don Callis if there was a chance that Chris Jericho could be brought into the plans involving Kenny Omega and Don Callis with AEW and Impact Wrestling in the future. And this is what Don Callis had to say about Chris Jericho. He said, quote, "I have a very small group of people that I consider my friends. Chris Jericho and I have been friends for 30 years. He's my oldest and closest friend in the business. And Chris and I, we talk business because Chris is brilliant. He really is brilliant. And me, I think Chris Jericho may go down as the greatest all-round performer and entertainer in the history of the business. I think Kenny Omega will go down as the greatest wrestler in the history of the business. And I think I will go down as the greatest revolutionary high-level thinker in the history of the business. That's three guys from Winnipeg, so that's pretty cool. Just as I did in 2017-18 with New Japan Pro Wrestling, when I put together the match that changed the entire wrestling business, my idea, my execution, Jericho versus Omega at the Dome. That match that Tony Khan said made him think was something that he could do with pro wrestling. Don Callis would then go on to once again take credit for the birth of AEW and imply that the main reason that Jericho was included with things to begin with was that the former AEW World Champion was a friend of Don Callis. He stated that he and Omega would absolutely work with him again because that's the kind of things he does for his friends and family. He said, quote, "We gave birth to AEW, and with that in mind, with that in the mind of the invisible hand, Don Callis, we got that. And I included my friend Chris Jericho in that idea, not just because Chris Jericho made it work. Chris Jericho's some massive star, but also because he's my friend. So now, as I find myself as the most talked about non-wrestling person in the business, and Kenny Omega is the most talked about wrestler, of course, we would both be open to helping Chris out by, having him in a situation where he could benefit from what Kenny and I are doing right now, because that's what Don Callis does for his friends and his family." So potentially, if you read between the lines there, maybe Don Callis is hinting that maybe Chris Jericho in the future could get involved in this Kenny Omega Impact Wrestling and AEW storyline by proxy because of the relationship he has with Don Callis, but also because of the relationship he has with Kenny Omega. Chris Jericho would fit into this whole situation perfectly. As I mentioned, he's friends with Don Callis. All three of those guys are from Winnipeg anyway, but he's friends with Don Callis. He had the match with Kenny Omega in New Japan. He had the rematch in AEW. It fits. Everything there fits. Now, if you think for a second, wow, I know Chris Jericho has history of Don Callis, he's Don Callis' best friend, and I know he has history of Kenny Omega from the match in New Japan and the matches in AEW, but realistically, would Chris Jericho go to Impact Wrestling? Really? The first ever Undisputed Champion, arguably the biggest star in AEW, certainly the guy's on the biggest contract in AEW, would he really go to Impact Wrestling? Would he really lower himself to make an appearance with Impact Wrestling? The answer is absolutely yes. Why? Because Chris Jericho has said it himself. Chris Jericho stated before, this was in 2019, that he contemplated a, quote, great offer from Impact Wrestling at that time. Now, obviously, AEW is now the home of Chris Jericho, but the former AEW World Champion said Impact was a close contender after putting, quote, a great offer on the table. Now, Jericho detailed his path to leaving WWE and signing with AEW on an episode of his podcast back in 2019, and this included all of his dealings with Vince McMahon over the past year in 2019. And he didn't, obviously, he relayed that Vince McMahon didn't sound happy about Chris Jericho appearing at the New Year's Dash event for New Japan and attacking NATO and signing a 3-match New Japan deal. He mentioned about all of that but he also spoke about how impressed he was with Impact Wrestling. This is what he had to say about potentially signing with Impact Wrestling. Again, this was back in 2019. This was when he just signed with AEW, and this was coming off of that really hot New Japan run. And he said, as I mentioned before, he was impressed with Impact Wrestling and they made him a great offer. Listen to this quote that Jericho said. He said, quote, "I've been really impressed by Impact over the past year. I thought Don Callis and Scott D'Amore have really turned things around in that company. I really, really enjoy it. I thought long and hard about doing some shows there. I even had a meeting with Scott and Don in Toronto with Ed Nordholm. The offer they made was a great offer. That's something funny when I hear all of these companies are vying for talent, free agents, WWE, AEW, Ring of Honor, New Japan, MLW. Dude, what about Impact? They've got money." Now, I'll stop the quote there because that's exactly what I've been saying for months now on the channel. People have this perception that Impact Wrestling doesn't have money. They're owned by Anthem. They have a lot of money. This is a very, very well-financed company. Now, Impact Wrestling is like any other business and any other promotion, that they have a budget. But to say that Impact Wrestling doesn't have money, Anthem doesn't have money, they offered the Good Brothers a very, very good contract, and we'll touch on that in a second. But going back to Chris Jericho's quote, so as I mentioned, he said, "What about Impact? They've got money. They were going to spend some money on Chris Jericho. We had some great matches planned. Jericho versus Sami Callihan, maybe Johnny Impact, Brian Cage, Rich Swann. I'd love to work with Rich Swann. So I did honestly talk to Impact and really, really thought about going there. And then Tony Khan came in with his offer. That's the biggest offer I've ever been offered in my career." So as I mentioned, if it wasn't for AEW, and I've said this several times and people have scoffed and people have said that's not true, that's not going to happen, blah, 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 Chris Jericho was very close to signing with Impact Wrestling back in 2019. He liked the company, he liked the money, and he liked that Don Callis was an executive there, and they had some great talent on the roster at the time, and he was interested. So fast forward to 2020, is it out of the realm of possibility that Jericho could make a few appearances with Impact Wrestling as part of this Impact and AEW deal? It is not out of the realm of possibility at all. If anything, it's maybe even more likely than it was in 2019, given that we've got this relationship with Impact Wrestling and AEW. Now, again, this was talked about in November. So that first quote I read to you there was from January 2019. Fast forward to November, only a month ago, and we had this report come out from the Wrestling Observer from Dave Meltzer. He mentioned that Impact Wrestling tried to get Chris Jericho on board by offering him a ton of money, but the contractual offer made by Tony Khan was just too good to refuse. This is what Dave Meltzer had to say, quote, "You know, Gallows and Anderson didn't come cheap, and they offered a ton of money to Chris Jericho. Not Tony Khan money, but they offered him a ton of money to try and get him. If there wasn't a Tony Khan, I don't know. I mean, I think Jericho would have gone to Vince. Maybe he would have gone to Impact. Maybe he would have enjoyed that he could just call his own shots." It was noted, of course, that Jericho could have done, quote, "whatever he wanted with Impact Wrestling" and, quote, "not been in the spotlight." And now, as Jericho mentioned before, AEW offered him a lot more money and plenty more people paying attention every single week on TNT. Of course, that isn't the case with Impact Wrestling. You've got AXS TV and maybe a little bit less money. Now we know, of course, Chris Jericho is very happy in AEW. It's not a case of Chris Jericho jumping to Impact Wrestling and leaving AEW. That's just not going to happen. He's under a long-term contract with AEW, and he said that he's never going to leave AEW. But with this AEW and Impact Wrestling relationship, anything is possible. As I mentioned before, a few months ago, if you'd have said, what's the chances of Chris Jericho appearing in Impact Wrestling before any of this Impact Wrestling AEW stuff, I would have said no way. I'd have said there was a chance back in late 2018, early 2019, when Jericho was working for New Japan, and there were rumors that Impact Wrestling had been talking to Chris Jericho. I would have said, who possibly, but after that, I would have said absolutely no way, because Jericho's enjoying himself so much with AEW, he's earning so much money, it just didn't make any sense. And Jericho has said himself he's not going to leave AEW, so I would have said no way. Now, who knows? Absolutely who knows? And I think all of this, it hinges on the success of the Kenny Omega storyline right now with AEW and Impact Wrestling. The buzz, the success, and obviously, fundamentally, when it comes to Jericho and Impact Wrestling, you've got that Don Callis connection. As long as Don Callis is in an executive position with Impact Wrestling, anything is possible. Anything is possible. As long as Don Callis is in power, anything is possible. And I think also you have to get in the mind of Chris Jericho, quite frankly. I think you have to get into the mind of who he is at this point in his life and at this point in his career. Jericho would love it. You can't tell me Jericho would not love to make an appearance in Impact Wrestling. At this point in his career, at this point in his life, he's 50 years of age, Jericho just loves the spotlight. And Jericho loves to do something new, and Jericho loves to get people talking. He loves to make news. He loves to create buzz and get attention in what he's doing. That's why he's been doing what he's doing in AEW. That's why he does the stuff he does in AEW. Look at him when he tweets about it every single week. He can do whatever he wants in AEW with a large audience, and then he tweets about it and he talks about the ratings, the demo, all of it. Jericho loves attention, he loves reinventing himself, and he loves doing stuff that's fun. He loves to create buzz. And doing an Impact Wrestling cameo would do just that, because we thought it would be impossible. We thought it would be impossible that Jericho could ever appear in another company apart from WWE. Right? Previously, he had that WWE rule. I'm not going to appear for a company apart from WWE. Well, that got altered when he went to New Japan. Then it became a case of, well, I'm not going to appear for a company that isn't WWE in North America. That changed when he went to AEW, and then he realized there was this world outside of the walls of WWE, even at that late stage of his career, and there was fun stuff he could do, and he could make good money doing it. And then he saw the buzz that came with it, because people thought Chris Jericho would never appear for a company that isn't WWE. So if he appeared for Impact Wrestling, can you imagine the buzz? Because we never thought that Chris Jericho would ever appear for Impact. The same way that we thought Kenny Omega would never appear for Impact Wrestling. So I think, look, Jericho, he calls himself the demo god, right? He calls himself the demo god. He loves talking about the ratings. He used to always talk about and tweet about the ratings that his quarter hours got and his segments got on Dynamite. You don't think that Jericho would love to do some appearance for Impact Wrestling and draw some record ratings? I guarantee you, when Kenny Omega, he made his few appearances for Impact Wrestling a couple of weeks ago, and there was that huge explosion in the ratings on AXS TV. Impact Wrestling did record numbers on AXS TV like they'd never done before. They did record numbers on Twitch. I think they did like 4 or 5 times the peak amount of viewers that they'd ever done on the Twitch streaming service. They did record numbers on YouTube. They were trending worldwide. And in the United States, they just had phenomenal success with this AEW crossover and this first Kenny Omega appearance. You don't think Chris Jericho was looking at that and saying, one, that should be me. I want to be in that position where I'm shattering records, doing all-time viewership on Twitch, trending worldwide. You don't think he's looking at that going, I can do that, I can do that. Furthermore, Jericho, I think now, would be looking at Kenny Omega's numbers that he did for AXS TV, that he did for Twitch, and all that kind of stuff, Impact Wrestling, and he'll say, if it was me, I can beat that record. I can beat that number on AXS TV. I can beat that number on Twitch. If I get involved, we're going to see those numbers, but even bigger. Why? Because I'm Chris Jericho. So I have no doubt in my mind that Jericho's looking at that and thinking, man, that was so much buzz. Look at the whole wrestling world. Look at social media. They were all talking about Kenny Omega and AEW and Impact Wrestling. You don't think Jericho's looking at that going, yeah, I want a bit of that. I can do that. I can get that attention. I can get those people talking about me and AEW and Impact Wrestling. At the very, very least, Jericho wants that attention. Jericho wants to break records. That's all he's about, is breaking records. Remember with 2019, when he won the AEW World Championship and he was going viral pretty much every second with a little bit of the bubbly? And then he tried it with everything else. He tried it with his dance stuff. He tried it with those segments with the Release the Hounds, all that stuff. Jericho loves it. Was it the Flim Flam or whatever it was? Jericho loves that stuff. He loves going viral. He loves getting attention. He loves trending. Jericho knows if he went to Impact Wrestling, he would do that. And again, I guarantee he's looking at those numbers set by Kenny Omega on AXS TV, on Twitch, or wherever, and he's saying, I can beat that. Jericho's all about breaking records, doing what the people thought was impossible, doing something new. Jericho is one of the premier people in pro wrestling that has just evolved and always tries to evolve his character, his ability in pro wrestling. He's always trying to revolutionize himself. So Jericho, I have no doubt in my mind, is looking at what Kenny Omega's doing right now with Impact Wrestling and said, I can do that, but I can do it better. Because every time AEW does a good number, Jericho tweets about it and takes credit for it. Can you imagine the bragging rights that would come with it if Jericho then did a good number for Impact Wrestling? Can you imagine the bragging rights if Jericho came in for an episode on AXS TV, just one episode, and shattered Kenny Omega's record? Can you imagine the bragging rights that he would tweet and talk about with that? Not only did he lay the foundations for AEW, but then he resurrected Impact Wrestling. It would be phenomenal. It would be absolutely phenomenal. And like I said, imagine he does break Kenny Omega's Impact record. It would be phenomenal. It would be absolutely fantastic. And he said it in the quote previously, and again, I think this is important. He said that he would love to work with Rich Swann. Well, Rich Swann is currently the Impact World Champion. And Jericho said that way before Rich Swann ever became the World Champion. Rich Swann became the World Champion at Bound for Glory back in October. But Jericho said in 2019 he wanted to work with Rich Swann all the way back then. So now, given that Rich Swann is in the main event, he's currently a World Champion, Jericho would be totally interested in working that program. And you have to look at what Jericho's doing at this point in his career as well. At this point in his career, Jericho is all about putting over younger talent in AEW and making talent, making new stars. Whether it's Sammy Guevara with the Inner Circle, whether it's MJF having matches with him at Full Gear and now having him in the Inner Circle, that feud's not done. Orange Cassidy, he put him over twice. Scorpio Sky, Darby Allin, he had matches with them on Dynamite for the AEW World Championship when he was the AEW World Champion. So I think Jericho would want to do the same for Rich Swann in Impact Wrestling. He would want to create a star. He would want to elevate a new star. So no doubt, if Jericho came in, there would be a huge amount of buzz. It'd be absolutely huge for Impact Wrestling. It'd be big for this AEW and Impact Wrestling crossover. And look, he was close before. It's not a case of he wasn't interested or he's not interested in Impact Wrestling. He was very, very close to coming into Impact Wrestling before AEW became a thing. So the interest is there, the desire is there. Even at the age of 50, Jericho's arguably more relevant than he's ever been and more hungry to do revolutionary things in pro wrestling than he's ever done before. Money isn't an issue. Jericho said it himself. Anthem has money. Anthem has money. Impact Wrestling have money. So it's not a case of Jericho's going to come in for a very small payoff. He's going to do very, very well if he does come in and make an appearance. Now, I'm not sure Impact necessarily, if they've got this relationship with AEW, would have to make this ginormous offer to Jericho because he obviously would already be under contract with AEW. So potentially they could get Jericho in even cheaper. Now, I'm sure they'd give him a good payoff for work in the event, but you know what I mean. It wouldn't be this ginormous offer like before. So given the relationship that looks to be underway with Impact Wrestling and AEW, given the relationship that's with Don Callis and Chris Jericho, and given the relationship that's between Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega, it's an absolute possibility. And if you really want a fantasy book here, we've spoken about an AEW versus Impact pay-per-view or an AEW and Impact TV special, an Invasion, a modern-day Invasion pay-per-view or something like that. If you have an AEW versus Impact Wrestling storyline, can you imagine if you had Chris Jericho switch sides, as it were, switch from AEW to Impact Wrestling in this storyline? That would certainly turn heads and get people talking with this storyline. Don Callis screwed AEW before, right? He screwed AEW and he screwed Tony Khan once before. He took the AEW World Championship and the AEW World Champion and he took him over to Impact Wrestling. Now, on top of that, he then steals AEW's crown jewel, their legendary, iconic figure, the first AEW World Champion in the company's history. He steals Chris Jericho. So not only does he steal the world title, he steals the world champion Kenny Omega, the best wrestler in the world. Then he steals Chris Jericho too. It would be huge. It would be a massive statement. It would be a massive storyline. It'd get so much buzz. So I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule it out. Like I said at the start of this video, a couple of months ago, I said you're crazy. Now, not so much, not so much. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Chris Jericho potentially competing at least once or at least making an appearance in Impact Wrestling? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, WWE, AEW, all that fun stuff. Get involved with the community and drop a comment below. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right-hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.